Hey guys, tonight we begin with the fiery life and legacy of Boudica, the warrior queen of the Iceni, whose courage and fury shook the Roman Empire to its core. Her rebellion was bold, brutal, and unforgettable, a defining moment of resistance in ancient Britain. From being crowned queen to leading tens of thousands into battle, Boudica's life was a storm wrapped in iron and fire. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are not born in a palace. There are no golden cradles or marble floors. You are born in a roundhouse, thatched roof, packed earth floor, smoke curling out of the hole in the ceiling like it's late for something. Outside, the wind hums across the moors. Inside, your mother hums something older. You are Iceni, born to the eastern edges of Britannia, a land the Romans will one day call a frontier, but which to you is simply home. There are no maps, only instincts. The rivers speak, the oaks stand tall, and the land feeds you when you respect it, and punishes you when you don't. As a child, you are not sheltered. You are wind-battered, mud-smeared, sun-warmed. You learn to ride before you walk properly. You learn the weight of a spear before you learn embroidery, which is just as well, since your embroidery looks like it lost a fight. Your parents encourage this. Daughters must be as sharp as sons, maybe sharper. Sons can be stupid and still inherit. Daughters have to earn it. The elders teach you stories, not from scrolls, but from memory. Tales of gods with antlers, queens with iron wills, and rivers that carry away cowards. You listen with wide eyes and a mouth full of honeyed oats. You don't just want to hear the stories. You want to be one. Your tribe lives close to the land and closer to rumour. You hear whispers of strange men with red cloaks and steel sandals landing to the south. They build roads where the earth didn't ask for them. They cut down sacred groves to make space for taxes. But they are far away. For now. You don't think about Rome. You think about horses. You think about the torque around your neck, bronze, heavy, passed down by the women who came before you. You think about your name, Boudica, and how it means victory. You smile at that. It feels more like a prophecy than a name. One day the Romans will know it too. But for now, you are still growing, still watching the fog roll in, still waiting for the story to begin. By the time you're 10, you've already learned two key truths of Iceni life. One, the Romans are always up to something, and two, if you don't learn to swing a blade, you may end up under one. You grow up surrounded by warriors, not polished soldiers with matching uniforms and synchronized marching like the Romans, but hardened fighters with wild hair, louder voices, and absolutely no sense of indoor volume. Armor is optional, scars are not. Your tutors are not scholars, they are survivors. Your lessons begin at dawn, not with arithmetic, but with a wooden sword and a bruised shin. You learn to block before you learn to breathe through your nose properly. Every meal comes with a side of training, whether it's dagger drills, spear throws, or dodging goats that seem personally offended by your existence. You're taught to ride by a man who's more horse than human and smells like he sleeps in hay, because he does. Your first mount is a shaggy pony with one eye and the attitude of a drunk badger. You bond immediately, but it's not all violence and livestock. You sit by the fire with the elders, listening to them argue about tribal matters with the same intensity one might reserve for life and death decisions. Spoiler, sometimes they are. You learn when to speak, when to listen, and how to roll your eyes politely behind someone's back. And then there are the druids, the local mystics, wrapped in robes and riddles, who insist on dragging you into rituals involving standing stones, sacred oaks, and long-winded poetry that may or may not be about you. One particularly dramatic elder insists you were chosen by the gods. You're not sure which gods or what for, but it sounds vaguely threatening. You grow into your name, Boudica, victory, and soon you are queen, not by birthright alone, but by alliance. You marry Prasutagus, the ruling king of the Iceni, a clever man, a cautious man, and importantly, a man who has learned to smile politely at Rome while gritting his teeth. Rome doesn't conquer all at once. Sometimes it offers contracts instead of swords. That's what happened to your husband. After an earlier revolt in 47 CE, not led by you yet, the Iceni agreed to become a client kingdom of Rome. A friend. You remain independent, in theory. In reality, you're now expected to nod approvingly at Roman taxes, Roman architecture, and Roman officials who can't pronounce local names. As queen, your life changes. You live in a larger roundhouse now, one with Roman pottery and the occasional visitor in polished armor who smells like olive oil and superiority. You wear fine wool and imported jewelry, but you never forget the feel of iron and bone. You host feasts, you pour wine, you endure Roman small talk. One governor gifts you a polished bronze mirror. You almost return the favor with your axe. Still, you play the role well. Diplomacy is another kind of war, and you learn its rhythms. You watch Prasutagus walk the tightrope. He trades with Rome, keeps the peace, but never quite trusts the hand he's shaking. Together, you rule a tribe that hasn't surrendered, but hasn't rebelled, yet. You give birth to daughters, 2 strong, sharp-eyed girls. They ride like lightning and bite like it too. You train them to speak with fire. You don't raise them to marry well. You raise them to survive. Then your husband grows sick. The illness spreads slowly, like ink in water. Prasutagus knows what happens to tribal lands when kings die without a Roman-friendly plan. So he does what he thinks is wise. He writes a will. He names Rome as co-heir to the Iceni kingdom, alongside you and your daughters. He thinks it's clever, a compromise, a bridge. But Rome doesn't do co-parenting, especially not with women. You bury your husband in silence. You place his talk on the altar. And then you wait. Not for grief to pass, but for Rome to arrive. And they will. Not with condolences, but with chains. Your husband's body is barely cold when they come. Roman administrators, wearing smug expressions and impractical cloaks, arrive at your settlement not to mourn, but to audit. They don't bring condolences. They bring scrolls, debt collectors, and a particularly punchable air of entitlement. Prasutagus's will, naming Rome and his family as heirs? Ignored. Conveniently. The empire claims everything: land, weapons, livestock, treasure, even your throne. As if grief wasn't insulting enough, they inform you that the Iceni are now fully under Roman control. No vote, no ceremony, just Latin paperwork and a forced smile. You try diplomacy. You quote their own laws back at them. They quote steel back at you. Then it escalates. Roman soldiers storm your home, not with an army. They don't need one. Just enough men to send a message. They tear down your status like it's scaffolding. They strip you, beat you, publicly. The queen of the Iceni, dragged through the dirt in front of your people. And your daughters, you dare not speak it aloud. What they endured was beyond cruelty. The kind of trauma Rome writes off as discipline. The kind that never leaves a mother's heart. You hold them afterward, trembling and silent. You look into their eyes, and something old stirs inside you, older than Rome. Something the Romans never understood. Fury with purpose. The village elders urge patience. They fear Rome's retribution. They speak of survival, of waiting, of silence. You do not scream, not yet. But inside you a new oath is written. The Iceni are watching. Your people kneel beside you in the dirt, not in weakness, but in shared rage. This wasn't just an insult to you. This was a message to every Briton. You will bow, or we will break you. And you think, if they wanted you broken, they should have killed you. You don't rise for your own dignity. You rise because the land itself demands it. The ancestors demand it. The gods of oak and iron demand it. You rise because your daughters will never be anyone's spoils. And somewhere far away, Rome has no idea that they've just made their worst mistake. They said it was justice, order, policy, a necessary correction. But what you remember is the sound, the whip on your back, the silence of your people, the weight of your daughter's stares. Not full of fear, but something worse, understanding. Because they know this isn't about tribute, or land, or politics. It's about humiliation. You, Boudica, queen of the Iceni, dragged from your home and lashed like a thief in front of your tribe. Not executed. No, that would have made you a martyr. This is more efficient. You're alive, broken, visibly disgraced, meant to serve as a warning. But whoever authorized this had clearly never met an angry Briton. The scars on your back don't hurt as much as the memory of your daughters, what was done to them, what can't be undone. They are too young for vengeance, but you are not. And as the blood dries, you begin to calculate. You don't scream. You plot. You attend the tribal councils. You say little. You listen more. You gather the whispers of other tribes just as angry, just as bruised. The Trinovantes, the Catuvalauni, the Dobunni. Rome thinks you are all fractured, and they're right, but even a cracked rock can crush a man's skull if dropped from high enough. You begin speaking in metaphors: fire, storm, the mother bear who loses her cubs. You do not demand war. You offer revenge as a natural consequence. The women hear you first, then the elders, then the warriors. You train in secret. Old weapons are reforged. The druids begin chanting at night. The gods are listening. So are the Roman spies. But by the time they understand what's building, it will be too late. You braid your daughter's hair with iron clasps. You sharpen your spear. You paint your face not for ceremony, but for war. One morning, you look in the river and don't see a queen. You see an executioner. Rome thought it was punishing you. What it actually did was give you the one thing no empire should ever hand its enemies: a reason. The wound has not healed, but now it bleeds forward. You don't make speeches. Not at first. You don't need to. The people have seen your back. They've seen your daughters' faces. That's the only campaign poster you need. But war needs momentum, not just pain. So you ride. Village to village. Campfire to council fire. Your presence does the talking. Tall, fierce, wrapped in a wolf fur cloak, your red hair wild in the wind. Some say your eyes gleam like coals. That's an exaggeration. Probably. But you let them believe it. Fear travels faster than truth. You speak of freedom, but not in pretty metaphors. You remind them what the Romans did. To you. To them. You name the taxes, the floggings, the gods disrespected, the groves desecrated. You speak plainly, because rage doesn't need poetry. The tribes gather. First the Trinovantes, old enemies of Rome, then others. Britons who never trusted you before suddenly see you not as royalty, but as vengeance given flesh. You sharpen not just weapons, but memory. You smear your face with blue woad. It stains your skin like ice. It isn't just for intimidation, though it works. It's ritual, a rebirth. You are not the woman who was beaten. You are the storm she became. Your army grows, thousands upon thousands, peasants with sickles, warriors with blades, druids with eyes that stare too long. Even the old and lame bring something: food, horses, stories. You ride a chariot, iron-bladed wheels cutting mud. Your daughters ride with you, not as ornaments, but as omens. You are a family affair now, a mother not just of children, but of rebellion. Word reaches Roman ears, of course. At first they laugh. The Queen, leading an army? How quaint. Then scouts report numbers, scale, coordination. Rome stops laughing, but they still don't believe you'll actually do anything. After all, Britons bicker. Tribes feud. Women mourn. They don't lead wars. They don't burn cities. But you are not here to meet expectations. You are here to set them on fire. Smoke rises from your campfires. But soon, very soon, the smoke will rise from theirs. They keep coming. First in dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. They arrive on horseback, on foot, by cart and chariot. Some wear cloaks of wool. Others come nearly bare, painted in swirling blue, eyes bright with something between faith and fury. There are farmers who've never held a weapon, and warriors who've forgotten what it's like not to. A boy no older than your daughters insists on bringing a slingshot made from his father's belt. You don't send him home. You nod. Because this is no longer a rebellion. This is a reckoning. The Roman word for you now is terra muliebris, the terror of a woman. You imagine them muttering it around fires, half mocking, half worried. You hope it haunts their dreams. Your camp grows into a mobile city. Traders arrive to sell bread, arrows and talismans shaped like your chariot. Bards begin composing songs before the first real battle is fought. Your name passes from lips like a prayer, or a threat, depending on who's listening. Still, you keep order. You appoint scouts, messengers, commanders of villages and clans. You don't want chaos. You want something Rome will never see coming. Organization. Every night the fires burn bright. The druids chant in languages older than empires. You bless weapons with blood. Sometimes pig. Sometimes not. You don't ask. There's no official head count, but the Romans will later claim your force was over 100,000 strong. You don't count. You feel them. The heat, the noise, the pressure of 10,000 dreams pushing behind your chariot wheels. Your daughters sleep near you, curled beneath a bear pelt. You watch them. They sleep like children, but they march like queens. You look at the assembled army, your people, your fury, your fire, and you think, this is what Rome was afraid of. And they were right. You are not Caesar. You are not crowned in gold, but you are followed, not for conquest, for justice, not for wealth, for vengeance. You tighten the grip on your spear. Soon there will be a Roman city on the horizon, and behind you, a sea of spears that refuses to forget. You choose Camulodunum first, the Roman colony at the edge of Iceni territory. Once, it was a tribal stronghold. Now it's a Roman veteran settlement, fat with smugness and marble. A model city for civilizing the Britons. It even has a temple, not to your gods, of course. No, they've built a gleaming shrine to Emperor Claudius, their dead emperor, as if worshipping a Roman corpse somehow legitimizes the living ones. The locals call it sacred. Your people call it offensive architecture. You don't arrive quietly. The scouts see you coming, or more precisely, they see the dust cloud you bring with you. Your army is too large to hide, and frankly, you've no interest in hiding. Subtlety is for traitors. This is a warning. Roman officials scramble. There are no legions stationed here, just retired soldiers and their families, men who thought their work was done. They arm themselves with rusted blades and parade armor. You arrive to find them preparing speeches, not defenses. You give them neither quarter nor time. The city falls in a matter of hours. Your army moves like a tide, smashing gates, toppling columns, torching villas. Your chariots circle, driving the terrified into narrow streets. The Roman citizens scream for mercy. You remember screaming too once, but not today. The temple of Claudius is the last to fall. The defenders barricade themselves inside, praying to stone and plaster. It takes 2 days to burn it down, not because of resistance, but because the fire is slow and thorough, like your memory. By the 3rd day, Camulodunum is ash, and the message is sent. Rome has lost a city, not to another empire, not to a rival army, but to the very people it claimed were already conquered. You stand among the ruins. You don't smile. This isn't joy, it's necessity. The wind shifts. Smoke clings to your cloak. Somewhere behind you, your daughters collect bits of scorched bronze, trophies from the temple. You let them. They deserve to carry weight. This is only the beginning. The next target is richer, larger, more important, and very, very Roman. Londinium. You don't rest long. You can't. Word spreads like fire, and so does fear. Rome knows now, and Rome responds, but not fast enough. You ride south toward Londinium, the jewel of Roman Britain, a trading hub, a commercial artery. It's young but bustling, full of merchants, soldiers, and colonists. They say it's the empire's future. You decide to cancel that future. Along the road, the people begin to flee. You don't chase them. You don't need to. Their panic works better than any banner. When refugees outrun soldiers, you know your message is landing. By the time you reach the outskirts of Londinium, you see it. The red cloaks are gone. Governor Gaius Suetonius Paulinus, a hard man, busy putting down a rebellion in Wales, made it back just in time to retreat. He looked at your numbers, your fires, your smoke-darkened sky, and did the most Roman thing imaginable. He left. He abandoned the city to save the province. You don't hesitate. Londinium is wide open. Streets meant for parades now run with ash. The marketplaces that once sold olive oil and honeyed dates are stripped clean, then razed. Roman homes, warehouses, bathhouses, all reduced to cinders. There are those who stay. Some believe the empire will protect them. Some are too old, too proud, or simply too slow. You issue one final offer. Leave now, or be judged by the gods of your land and mine. Many ignore you. History will call what happens next a massacre. The Romans naturally will count the bodies. Tens of thousands, they'll say. Maybe that's true. But what you know is this. You were unheard, and now the world listens. Among the flames, you find a Roman ledger, half burned. It lists Iceni names beside debts. You toss it into the fire and keep walking. No temples are spared, not this time. You tear the statues down with your own hands. The gods who watched your daughters suffer get no mercy. By nightfall, Londinium is silent. The city does not scream anymore. You ride out with your army larger than before, fed by smoke and fury. The next target is already chosen, Verulamium. And after that, the reckoning. Verulamium isn't just Roman, it's Roman with ambition. Streets paved in imported stone, fountains that never asked permission, villas that stretch wider than most tribal clearings. It's not a military post, it's a statement, a polite one, wrapped in mosaics and taxes. You head there next. By now the message precedes you. Verulamium's merchants have heard of Camulodunum, of Londinium. They know what happens to those who welcome Rome too eagerly. The wealthy pack their carts. They flee west, clutching silver gods and ledgers full of unpaid grain. You let them go. Vengeance, you've learned, has a schedule. When you arrive, it's not resistance you meet. It's emptiness. The soldiers are gone. The politicians gone. Only the unlucky remain, and a few who simply didn't believe in you. The kind of people who assumed no mother, no woman, no tribal queen could make the empire tremble. You show them otherwise. The gates fall open like rotten fruit. Your warriors pour through the streets. Flames follow. The town centre, once designed to awe, cracks and collapses under its own pride. The temple is empty, but you burn it anyway. The bathhouses hiss like dying snakes. Statues melt. Market stalls char. A scroll is tossed from a balcony and lands at your feet. You glance down. Latin, columns of numbers, and one word repeated often, tribute. You smile, a grim, humourless thing, and toss it into the fire. It's not just the city that burns, it's what it stood for. Verulamium was meant to be the future, a Romanised Britain, a place where Latin silenced the old songs, and wine replaced mead, and a woman like you would bow instead of lead. Instead, it's smoke and rubble. By the third day, it's done. You've burned 3 Roman towns to the ground. Your army swells with every step, with every ember. Some join because they believe, some because they fear, some because they have nowhere else to go. You don't ask why, you only ride forward. You've struck at the body. Now Rome will strike with its teeth. The governor is preparing a defence, and the final battle is on the horizon. You ride through ash now. It clings to your boots, your hair, your breath. The gods have had their offering. 3 Roman towns, burned to the bones, their columns toppled like brittle trees. You've written your message in smoke and charred stone, but you're starting to feel the weight. Not regret? No, but consequence. Your army is massive, unpredictable, glorious, and a bit bloated. Too many mouths, too much loot. Not enough discipline. The chariots creak under stolen pottery. Some warriors ride with gold necklaces and Roman tunics draped like trophies. A few have swapped spears for wine jugs. They cheer you still. They still chant your name. But it's changing. This army. It's no longer just vengeance. It's become movement, myth, momentum. And momentum has no brakes. You hear whispers. Some ask when you'll stop. Others ask why you haven't already marched on the Roman fortresses. And others, more honest, ask where the next loot will come from. Justice has followers, but treasure has investors. The Druids sense it too. They urge ritual, grounding, something to keep the centre from crumbling. You nod, but say little. Even you feel the tilt. You still ride at the front. Your daughters, hardened now, never leave your side. But when they sleep, you stare at the fire and count the days since it all began. You thought revenge would taste sharper, but instead, it tastes like iron and smoke. A bitter tea with no end. Rome is regrouping. Suetonius has returned from Wales with a real army this time. Hardened veterans, tight formations, real discipline. You hear he's chosen a battleground. A narrow valley with woods at his back. No flanks to outmaneuver. No place for your wild cavalry to sweep around. You've burned cities, but cities don't fight back. Now you'll face soldiers. Real ones. The ones who don't panic when you scream, who don't run at the sight of blue war paint or hear gods in the wind. You have numbers, tens of thousands, but he has precision. The Druids say the gods still favour you. The omens are still strong. But omens don't hold formation when the arrows start to fall. You've been marching forward for so long, it takes a moment to recognise what's happening. Rome is no longer retreating. They've chosen their ground, a tight, narrow valley flanked by forest and hills. No place for your chariots to manoeuvre. No room to flank. Just a corridor, a funnel, a trap. You approach with confidence. Why wouldn't you? Your army stretches the horizon. Farmers, warriors, druids, even former slaves marching with kitchen knives. You outnumber the Romans more than 10 to 1. The gods have favoured you this far. Why not again? But something about this field feels different. The Romans are waiting, not panicking, not scrambling. Their shields are polished, their formations are tight. You can't even see their faces, just walls of iron and silence. They aren't running, they're ready. You line up your forces, banners rise, the war horns blare. Your daughters ride beside you, their eyes fierce and bright. You call out to the sky, a prayer, a scream, a declaration. Then you charge, and the Roman wall doesn't move. Your warriors slam into it like waves against a cliff. Again and again. The sound is thunder, spears snapping, shields crashing, voices cracking. But their line holds, it always holds. The valley works against you. Your numbers clog the field. There's no room to maneuver, to retreat, even to breathe. Your own men become the wall that pins you in place. And then, the counterstrike. Rome doesn't just defend, it advances, slowly, cruelly, perfectly timed. Like clockwork with swords. The wedge formations pierce your lines. The cavalry swings in. What began as a charge becomes a crush, a rout, a slaughter. You scream until your throat goes hoarse. You try to reach the front to pull your daughters back, but the press is too thick, the chariots jammed, the bodies too many. You didn't expect this. Not here. Not like this. The wind that once carried fire now carries ash and the sound of falling spears. This is not a battle. It is a reversal. The Romans have remembered who they are, and they are done running. You stay until the end, even as the screams fade and the earth turns red beneath your feet. Even as the sky fills not with divine fire, but with crows. Even as your warriors, those who once sang your name like a war drum, fall one by one beneath the Roman blades. You do not run. You dismount when your chariot can go no farther. You draw your blade, iron, dulled at the edge, but still sharp enough for this. You find your daughters amid the crush. They're alive, bloodied, breathing. You press your foreheads together. No words, just recognition, shared fire, shared end. The Druids are already dead, their chants drowned by steel. Your army? Gone. Some trampled, others broken, others fleeing into the woods. Rome does not chase. It doesn't have to. The battle was surgical, brutal in its efficiency, a lesson written in flesh. You brought a tidal wave. They brought a dam, and it held. You retreat only when you must, slipping into the trees like a shadow. You find a hollow not far from the battlefield. Quiet, untouched, your daughters with you. The three of you sit beneath a twisted yew. You watch the branches sway, slow and heavy, like the breathing of the land itself. This wasn't just a defeat. It was the end of something older than Rome. The old gods, the old ways, the dream of a Britain that could belong to itself. They will write that you poisoned yourself, that you chose death over capture. Maybe that's true, maybe not. No one will ever really know. What matters is this. You didn't die on your knees. You didn't die silent. You rose, you burned, you fought. You gave the empire a scar it would never forget. The Romans will claim victory, but even Suetonius will admit it. Your rebellion nearly lost them Britain. You weren't just a queen. You were a storm in human form. And even after your body returns to the earth, the name Boudica will echo, through fear, through fire, through every woman who refuses to be forgotten. The battlefield is quiet now. Suetonius, the Roman governor, surveys the carnage. His men collect weapons, strip bodies, pile the dead. Efficient, grim work. History demands records. And Rome, ever practical, begins rewriting before the blood has even dried. They call it a victory. Of course they do. They say Boudica died honourably, or dishonourably, or disappeared. No one agrees. Tacitus claims she took poison. Cassius Dio suggests illness. Some say she rode into the mist and became legend. A nice story, easy to market. But Rome prefers closure, something footnotable. Your daughters vanish from the record entirely, which is Rome's way of admitting you scared them. Britain remains under Roman control, but it's different now. The empire doesn't build new temples to Claudius. It tightens the reins, fortifies the settlements, garrisons more troops. They rule, yes, but cautiously. With the occasional glance over the shoulder, they'll pretend you were a fluke, a moment, an outburst. But moments don't burn cities. Outbursts don't rally nations. You became the one thing Rome couldn't annex, a myth. Years pass, centuries. The empire collapses as all empires do, but your name survives, passed in whispers through British woods, carved into stones, sung in halls lit by fire and defiance. They turn you into a symbol, sometimes a queen, sometimes a goddess, sometimes a mother of the nation. The Victorians, always sentimental, will build a bronze statue of you in London. Chariot wheels spinning, daughters by your side, forever frozen just before the charge. You, who nearly broke the empire, reduced to tourist inspiration. But you don't mind. Because myths are stubborn, and fire, even once extinguished, leaves behind heat. In every rebellion your shadow lingers. In every march your footsteps echo. In every woman told to sit down and stay quiet, there's a whisper. Boudica did not. History tries to bury you beneath the ruins of your defeat, but it never quite manages to keep the earth still. You are not gone. You are rooted. And the ashes? They're fertile. Let's begin with the smoke. Thin, curling, persistent. It rises slowly through the still air of a sacred hall, the kind of place built with silence in mind. You are in ancient Mesopotamia, or perhaps Egypt, or maybe a temple in India. It doesn't matter much. The practice is nearly the same. Here, fragrance is not luxury, it is necessity. Priests, barefoot and robed, carry small clay burners or bronze censers, filled with glowing embers. Upon these, they drop resin, beads of hardened tree sap, gathered from distant lands, frankincense with its bright citrus edge, myrrh, darker, earthy, almost bitter. The moment it touches the coal, it sizzles, then smokes, then perfumes. The air is no longer air, it is sanctified. In the temples of Egypt, they took this further. A blend known as kaifi was meticulously prepared, a mix of over a dozen ingredients, wine, honey, raisins, juniper, and cinnamon among them. It wasn't cooked during the day. It was prepared at dusk, when the coolness allowed aromas to rise more gently. Kaifi wasn't just a fragrance, it was a ritual in itself. The making of it was prayer. The burning of it was offering. The smell of it was believed to calm the gods and the dead. In ancient India, sandalwood and camphor played similar roles. In Greece, temples burned aromatic woods and resins to accompany hymns. In early Israelite tradition, the burning of incense was dictated by exact measurements. Too much, or the wrong mixture, was considered dangerous. Divine things had rules. Why all this attention to smell? Because for the ancients, scent was a pathway, a road from the mortal to the divine. Unlike statues or songs, scent is invisible and lingers. It travels in all directions. It reaches you even if you close your eyes. To ancient peoples, that made it sacred. So the temples remained fragrant, constantly, not just during ceremony. The air itself became an offering. A place could smell holy. And if a place could smell holy, then maybe, just maybe, you could too. Now breathe in, as if you were standing there, and exhale. Let the smoke rise and fade. Now let us drift east, to the warm shores of Egypt, to the glittering city of Alexandria. Imagine the breeze coming off the Mediterranean, salty, warm, heavy with jasmine and sandalwood. Cleopatra, Queen of the Nile, ruler, linguist, alchemist of seduction, did not simply wear perfume. She crafted legend from it. Cleopatra understood something few rulers truly grasped. The nose remembers. Long after gold has dulled and words have faded, scent lingers. It clings to memory. So she used it, not only to entice, but to command. She wasn't merely perfumed, she was an experience. According to the Roman historian Plutarch, Cleopatra once had the sails of her royal barge soaked in perfume, oils of rose and cinnamon, so that her arrival could be detected by scent alone, long before she came into view. The air around her was curated. You smelled Cleopatra before you saw her. You remembered her long after she left. Inside her palace, she had perfume laboratories where attendants mixed oils with myrrh, balsam, and rare resins from Arabia and India. These weren't just pleasant concoctions. Cleopatra studied them. She experimented. She believed certain scents could stir passion, bring sleep, even shift fate. She wasn't wrong. Aromatherapy, thousands of years before the word existed. And yet her perfumes were more than romantic. They were political tools. When Cleopatra met Julius Caesar, and later Mark Antony, she was already a master of timing, dress, and smell. She knew which oils to wear in which settings. Frankincense in temples, neroli for banquets, musk and spikenard in private chambers. Every note had a purpose. There is even a legend that Cleopatra once created a scent so alluring that it caused a general to forget his own name. That may be fiction. But what is certain is this: no other ruler made fragrance into a language as she did. For Cleopatra, perfume was not indulgence, it was power, it was strategy, a whisper delivered not through voice, but through the air itself. So tonight, if your room is still, imagine her walking past. You won't hear her, but perhaps you'll smell rose and cinnamon and honeyed wind, and that will be enough. Now let the breeze take us to the marble courtyards of Greece and Rome, lands of columns, scrolls, and long philosophical walks. But tonight, we do not come for debate, we come for fragrance. The Greeks approached scent with curiosity. They believed aroma was more than decoration. It shaped behavior, even morality. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, recommended aromatic baths and massages to maintain balance in the body and mind. For him, rosemary oil wasn't just pleasant, it was medicinal. Sandalwood soothed, myrrh purified, scent aligned the soul, but not everyone agreed. The philosopher Plato looked at perfume with suspicion. In his view, perfumes softened character, made one lazy, indulgent. A strong citizen, he argued, should smell like hard work, like olive oil and wisdom, not exotic spices. And yet, in practice, most Greeks ignored him. Fragrance remained popular at banquets, weddings, and athletic festivals. Wreaths of lavender or mint were worn on the head, not just for style, but to keep the mind alert. Then came the Romans, and they didn't just adopt Greek perfumes. They escalated the entire affair. Romans perfumed everything. They bathed in rosewater, scented their clothes with saffron, and even sprinkled perfumed dust on banquet floors so that each footstep released fragrance. At grand feasts, guests were anointed with oils between courses. Some wealthy Romans had fountains that sprayed perfumed water into the air. The Emperor Nero once ordered an entire ceiling to rain rose petals and myrrh onto his guests. And yet, even the Romans argued about excess. Seneca the Younger, a Stoic philosopher, complained that the baths reeked of too many perfumes, not of man, he said, but of a bouquet. To him, virtue did not wear cologne. Still, perfumes remained deeply embedded in Roman life, in romance, ritual, and death. Perfume bottles made of glass, alabaster, or clay were buried with the dead. Scent was not just for the living, it was for remembrance. In both Greece and Rome, perfumes walked the line between luxury and necessity, virtue and vice. They were invisible yet powerful, capable of changing the mood of a room or the memory of a moment. Now we drift further back in time, to the cradle of civilization, where rivers cradle reeds and the ziggurats rise like steps to the heavens, ancient Mesopotamia, Sumer, Akkad, Babylon. Long before Cleopatra's perfumed sails or Roman rosewater fountains, people here were already obsessed with scent. In clay tablets dating back over 4,000 years, we find recipes for perfumes. Some were dedicated to gods, others to kings. These early perfumers used crushed herbs, resins, and flowers, mixed into animal fats or pressed oils. Myrrh, cypress, calamus root. Even cedar ground into paste. These were not random mixtures. They followed proportions, methods. They wrote it all down in cuneiform, the first known perfume manuals. Scent was deeply tied to status. The priests of the great temples anointed statues of deities daily, not with water, but with sacred oils. To neglect the scenting of a god's statue was considered sacrilege. Fragrance maintained cosmic order. That which smelled good was pure. That which stank was chaos. In Babylon, the hanging gardens may or may not have existed, but aromatic plants like coriander, thyme, and roses certainly did. The palace gardens weren't just for food or beauty. They were perfume factories. As the wind blew through them, the air itself became an extension of power. perfume also played a role in courtship. In Assyrian records, men of status sent perfumed garments or oil-soaked handkerchiefs as gifts. These gestures spoke volumes without a word. "I smell like wealth," they said. "I am worth remembering." Mesopotamian burial rites also included perfume. The body was washed with oils, the tomb filled with scented goods. In life, scent was status. In death, it was dignity. They believed fragrance might help the spirit transition, gently. And then there were the merchants. Babylonian traders traveled far for spices and resin. The scent trade was one of the earliest global networks, linking the Indus Valley, Arabia, and Egypt in a quiet, fragrant economy. The cost of myrrh rivaled gold. Let the sands settle now and step quietly into the heart of ancient Egypt, a place where scent was not merely a pleasure, but a gateway to eternity. In Egypt, perfume was inseparable from ritual, medicine, and the afterlife. It wasn't just for the living, it was for the dead. And so the art of embalming became the highest form of perfumery. The process was elaborate. The body was washed in palm wine, not to cleanse, but to purify. Then natron, a kind of natural salt, was applied to draw out moisture. But here's where the fragrance begins. After desiccation, the body was anointed in layers of oils: cedarwood, myrrh, frankincense, cinnamon, and juniper berry. These weren't random selections. Each oil served a spiritual purpose, and each scent had symbolic meaning. Frankincense, with its citrus-like bite, was said to drive away evil. Myrrh represented healing. Cinnamon warmed the body. These oils didn't just preserve, they consecrated. The goal of mummification was not simply to stop decay, it was to transform the body into something holy, something divine, something sweet-smelling. The ancient Egyptians believed the gods themselves smelled good, that the breath of the gods was fragrant. To enter the afterlife, one had to smell like a god. Even the wrappings were scented. Linen soaked in oils was layered around the body in careful spirals. Amulets were tucked between folds. In some royal tombs, archaeologists have found small perfume jars still sealed, still containing traces of thick resinous paste, thousands of years old, and yet faintly aromatic. Perfume was also part of the funerary offerings. Jars of kefi, the sacred incense blend, were placed near the sarcophagus. Perfumed cones were worn on wigs during mourning rituals. These wax cones, scented with lotus and honey, would slowly melt in the heat, anointing the head and releasing fragrance during the ceremony. It was both visual and olfactory theatre. To the Egyptians, death did not smell of decay. It smelled of myrrh, of pine resin, of eternity. Let us follow the trail now, not of armies or empires, but of fragrance. Invisible, persistent, and profoundly valuable. This is the story of the spice routes, arteries of ancient trade where perfume was born, bottled and sent drifting across civilizations. Long before perfumes were mass-produced, their ingredients had to be hunted, harvested and hauled, sometimes over thousands of miles. Myrrh from the Horn of Africa, cinnamon from Sri Lanka, spikenard from the Himalayas, frankincense from southern Arabia, where trees bled golden resin. These weren't just exotic aromas, they were currency. The demand was constant. Babylon wanted frankincense, Egypt needed myrrh, Greece adored rose oil, Rome demanded everything. But none of these civilizations had all the ingredients. So merchants set out, by camel caravan, by ox cart, by fragile ship. They crossed blistering deserts and stormy seas, their cargo sealed in clay pots or goatskin pouches. Perfume ingredients were precious and perishable. A single cracked jar of oil could ruin a merchant's fortune. But the rewards? Enormous. In some periods, a pound of cinnamon was worth more than silver. Along these routes, ideas travelled too. Techniques, recipes. Perfume was not merely traded, it was transformed. In India, perfumers experimented with distillation. In Arabia, they refined techniques for capturing floral essences using enfleurage and oil maceration. In Persia, fragrance became entwined with poetry, medicine, and paradise itself. By the time materials reached Greece or Rome, they carried not only scent, but story. A vial of spikenard wasn't just exotic, it was legendary. Kings had traded for it. Saints would one day be anointed with it. These ancient highways, stretching from China to the Mediterranean, weren't marked by signs or milestones, but by smell. Enter a market in Damascus, and the air would be thick with cardamom, saffron, and sandalwood. Turn a corner in Petra, and you'd pass walls lined with resin and rose petals. The cities smelled like the world. Now, let us walk softly into the sacred groves and stone temples of ancient India, where fragrance was not just worn, it was worshipped. In India, scent was woven into every layer of life: medicine, ritual, love, and philosophy. The Vedas, some of the oldest scriptures known, speak of perfumes and incense as gifts to the gods. Offerings of ghee, camphor, and sandalwood were burned not to mask odour, but to elevate prayer. Scent was seen as a purifier, not of places, but of souls. Among the most revered was sandalwood, smooth, creamy, and cooling. It was ground into paste and applied to statues of deities, to the foreheads of priests, and to the bodies of the dead. The scent was considered calming to both gods and humans. To apply it was to align oneself with peace. Other popular ingredients included agarwood, vetiver, and jasmine. Jasmine garlands weren't just decorations for weddings and festivals. They were believed to awaken feelings of love and divine connection. In classical Sanskrit poetry, lovers often describe each other not just by appearance, but by fragrance. Perfume wasn't bottled in the modern sense. Instead, it was blended fresh. Oils were extracted by soaking petals in sesame or coconut oil, sometimes with milk, and filtered through fine cloth. This slow, deliberate process gave rise to attars, concentrated natural perfumes that were treasured for their complexity. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Indian perfumery was its link to meditation and healing. In the system of Ayurveda, certain smells were said to balance the body's energies, known as doshas. For example, cooling vetiver soothed inflammation, warming cinnamon stirred sluggish circulation. The nose, in this philosophy, was the entrance to the brain, and therefore the gateway to consciousness itself. Incense, too, was central. In temple halls, thin sticks of dhupa smoke coiled toward the ceiling, carrying prayers upward. In homes, families lit incense at dawn and dusk, welcoming and releasing the day. Even now, millions continue the ritual, quietly, reverently, without a word. Let us now cross into ancient China, a land of balance, silence, and subtle beauty. Here, scent was not loud or lavish. It whispered. It drifted gently, like calligraphy in the air. In early Chinese culture, perfume was not about adornment or seduction. It was about harmony. Scent aligned the spirit with nature and brought the inner world into balance with the outer one. It was philosophy, not fashion. The ancient Chinese used incense far more than oils. Oils were considered too strong, too assertive. Incense, on the other hand, had discipline. It could be measured, timed, and shaped. Thin coils burned for hours, marking the passage of the day. In Buddhist temples, monks used sandalwood and agarwood incense to focus their meditation. The soft smoke served as both clock and compass, leading the mind inward. Confucian scholars, too, were deeply devoted to incense. A quiet study would not be considered complete without a bronze censer gently smoking in the corner. The scent was thought to cleanse the mind before study or writing. It wasn't decoration, it was preparation. In Taoist practice, fragrance symbolized qi, the vital energy of life. If your surroundings smelled wrong, your body was probably imbalanced. Aromatic herbs like cassia bark, star anise, and clove were prescribed not only to improve scent, but to restore health. Fragrance, medicine, and spirit were all one. Even clothing was scented. Small pouches called jiangnang were worn at the waist, filled with fragrant herbs. These weren't just pleasant, they were protective. It was believed that wearing herbs like mugwort and patchouli could ward off illness and evil. During the Tang and Song dynasties, such sachets became an art form, embroidered, jeweled, and gifted during festivals. Perfume was also used in poetry. The great poets of the Tang era often described seasons not by colour or sound, but by smell. Spring came with plum blossoms, autumn with fallen leaves and old wood. A person's memory, or their character, could be described by the scent they left behind. Now let us take a final breath, a breath that travels across time, across deserts and rivers, palaces and temples. We return to the present, but the fragrance of the ancient world still lingers, faintly, stubbornly. Much of what was once known about ancient perfumery has vanished. The formulas were kept as secrets, guarded by priests, physicians, and perfumers. Some recipes were inscribed on clay tablets, others on papyrus scrolls. Many were lost to fire, flood, or conquest. The great libraries of Nineveh and Alexandria both held fragrance texts. None survived intact. And yet, here and there, whispers remain. In 2012, archaeologists unearthed a 2,000-year-old perfume factory in Cyprus, burnt clay vats, traces of lavender and olive oil. In Egypt, residues found in tomb jars suggested mixtures of myrrh, cinnamon, and lotus oil. In Israel, scholars have attempted to reconstruct the sacred temple incense, the ketoret, based on ancient texts. The ingredients? Still debated, still sacred. Even Cleopatra's perfumes have been reimagined. A team of researchers in 2019 claimed to reproduce one of her signature blends, based on ancient recipes and residue from Egyptian perfume bottles. The result? Dark, spicy, earthy, long-lasting. Not the kind of perfume found in modern shops, but something deeper, something older. Perfume, after all, is memory suspended in oil. It tells stories silently. You cannot hold it, yet it holds you. One drop can carry 1,000 years. Today, the descendants of those ancient scents live on, in rituals, in medicine, in flowers pressed between pages. Modern perfumers still use oud from agar wood, just as in China. They still use myrrh and frankincense, just as in Mesopotamia. Rose oil, still expensive, still beloved, just as Cleopatra favoured. Even the idea of scent as sacred remains. Lighting incense before meditation, spraying perfume before a special evening, washing a loved one's hands in rose water. These gestures are ancient. We just forgot how ancient. It began with a sound, not the clank of chains or the bark of a hound, but something softer, a whisper, passed from one person to another under cover of darkness, behind cabin doors and church pews. It wasn't a name or a threat. It was a direction. North. In the early 1800s, enslaved African Americans began fleeing the plantations of the American South, not just with desperate hope, but with help. The Underground Railroad was not an actual railroad. There were no tracks, no trains. It was a hidden web of people, places, and plans, routes carved into memory, safe houses disguised as ordinary farms, barn lofts with trapdoors, false bottom wagons, cellars behind walls, conductors, often free black Americans, white abolitionists, or formerly enslaved people themselves, guided runaways on foot, by night, using only the stars, especially the North Star, to navigate. They crossed swamps, rivers, and forests. They slept in haystacks and hollow trees. And they knew that one wrong knock could mean capture or death. Yet, the system worked, and it spread. Word of mouth became the most powerful signal, using songs, quilts, and code words to mark houses that could be trusted. A lantern in a certain window, a particular flower planted out front. Everything meant something. It wasn't centralized. There were no headquarters. It was a living organism. built on bravery, shaped by secrecy, and it relied entirely on trust. A person risking everything to run had to rely on strangers in strange lands with no certainty of safety. And yet they ran. By the mid-1800s, the Underground Railroad stretched from the Deep South to northern states like Ohio and Pennsylvania, and even farther, to Canada, where US laws could not reach. Thousands of people escaped through this invisible network, and behind every escape was an untold number of quiet heroes, farmers, ministers, teachers, and families who opened their doors, shared their bread, and risked imprisonment for the sake of a stranger's freedom. It was not an act of rebellion, but of conscience, of humanity. In the silence of those nights, footsteps moved through cornfields and creeks, inching toward freedom. The railroad didn't run on steam. It ran on hope and whispers. She stood barely 5 feet tall, with a soft voice and a scar on her head that never let her sleep through the night. But when Harriet Tubman moved, people followed, and chains were broken. Born into slavery in Maryland around 1822, Harriet Tubman knew the brutality of bondage firsthand. She had been beaten, whipped, and nearly killed before she ever reached adulthood. At one point, a heavy iron weight thrown by an overseer fractured her skull. It left her with a lifetime of headaches and vivid, dreamlike visions she believed were messages from God. In 1849, Harriet escaped alone. She followed the North Star on foot, through the marshes, woods, and danger. It would have been enough to survive. But Harriet wasn't finished. She went back, and again, and again. Over the course of a decade, Harriet Tubman returned to the South an estimated 13 times, guiding over 70 enslaved people to freedom. She never lost a single one. Not a single person under her care was captured. A feat so extraordinary, it became legend even in her lifetime. She carried a pistol, not just for protection against slave catchers, but to prevent anyone from turning back. The stakes were too high. If you were with Harriet, you kept going forward. They called her Moses, after the biblical figure who led his people out of Egypt. Like Moses, she relied on faith, but also on precise planning, uncanny timing, and trusted allies. She knew which homes to stop at, which rivers to cross, and which towns to avoid. She moved at night, using songs and bird calls to communicate in code. Harriet Tubman eventually became one of the most wanted women in the South. A $40,000 reward was once offered for her capture, an astronomical sum for the time, but no one ever turned her in. Later, she would work as a nurse, a Union Army spy, and a suffragist. But it was her time on the Underground Railroad that shaped her legend, not as a myth, but as a symbol of what one person can do against a system built to crush them. Harriet Tubman did not free half a nation. She simply refused to leave anyone behind. There were no printed maps, no train schedules, no road signs that read, "Freedom, next exit." The Underground Railroad was built entirely on memory, trust, and silence. Every turn of the path had to be remembered, not written. Every safe house had to look like any other farmhouse on the outside, and something entirely different within. Routes varied depending on the time, region, and threat level. Some ran through dense forests of the Carolinas, others followed the rivers of Ohio or the winding roads of Pennsylvania. For many, the final destination was Canada, where US law could not drag them back. But getting there meant navigating through hundreds of miles of slave patrols, bounty hunters, and betrayal. That's where the genius of the system came in. Safe houses, known as stations, were often homes of abolitionists, Quakers, free black families, or sympathetic farmers. These homes might contain hidden rooms behind staircases, trapdoors in kitchen floors, or false walls that led to candle-lit cellars. Some even used hollowed-out wagons with false bottoms to transport passengers during the day. The people who guided escapees from one safe location to another were called conductors. They memorized entire networks, landmarks, friendly homes, dangerous areas, and often risked arrest or worse if caught. Passengers had to trust these conductors completely. There was no going back. But how did they communicate all this without tipping off slave owners or authorities? Code. A song sung in the fields might hold a double meaning. Follow the drinking gourd was more than music. It was a set of directions. The drinking gourd referred to the Big Dipper, and its handle points to the North Star, a celestial compass guiding people north. Quilts hung on fences might show patterns that indicated safety, a star for direction, a log cabin for shelter, a zigzag for danger ahead, a lantern in a window, a certain flower in a pot. These were the signs of sanctuary. Everything was ordinary. And yet, everything was part of something extraordinary. It wasn't luck that saved people on the Underground Railroad. It was design, precise, patient, and deeply human. A map you could not see, but you could follow, with faith and footsteps. Freedom was never free. For those who stepped onto the Underground Railroad, the price was staggering, paid not just in footsteps, but in fear, silence, and sacrifice. Runaway slaves risked far more than capture. Laws like the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 made it legal and profitable for anyone, even in free northern states, to seize an escaped slave and return them for a bounty. The law required citizens to assist in captures and punished those who helped fugitives with fines and prison time. Even those who had been free for years lived with the constant threat of being dragged back south. For the escapees, every movement was danger. Patrols rode on horseback, checking woods and roads. Dogs were trained to hunt human scent. Wanted posters bore descriptions, scars, skin tone, height, and rewards tempting enough to turn neighbours into informants. Yet despite this, they ran. Families were often torn apart. A mother might escape with one child, leaving others behind, promising to return. Some did. Many couldn't. The journey was long, and the penalty, if caught, was brutal. Whipping, imprisonment, mutilation, death. But the danger wasn't only for those running. The conductors and allies who opened their doors were also hunted. People like Levi Coffin, a white Quaker businessman in Indiana, helped an estimated 3,000 fugitives, knowing full well he could lose everything. Black abolitionists, especially, faced even greater risk. Free African Americans caught assisting runaways were often themselves accused of being fugitives and kidnapped into slavery. Entire communities sometimes paid the price. In some towns, safe houses were burned. In others, Underground Railroad participants were attacked or driven out. Still, they persisted. Because for many, the question wasn't whether it was legal, it was whether it was right. These were not professional spies or trained revolutionaries. They were farmers, teachers, ministers, mothers, and children. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things in the face of terrifying consequences. What made the Underground Railroad remarkable wasn't that it existed. It was that, despite the cost, it never stopped. Every lantern lit in a window was an act of defiance. Every door opened was a quiet revolution, and every step taken toward freedom was a step into danger willingly embraced. In the heart of many southern and northern black communities, there stood one building that was more than just a place of worship. It was shelter, it was strategy, it was signal. The church. For those fleeing slavery, and for those helping them, the black church was both fortress and flame, sacred in more ways than one. While slave owners allowed some religious gatherings, they often restricted unsupervised worship, fearing what they called Negro spirituals might stir rebellion. And they weren't wrong. Those songs carried more than faith. They carried information. Swing Low, Sweet Chariot wasn't just a hymn. It was a message that a chariot, a conductor or wagon, was coming soon to take someone home, code for a journey north. Wade in the Water advised fugitives to travel through rivers and streams, not just to escape dogs, but to erase scent. Songs like these were sung slowly, gently, in rhythm with labor, appearing harmless, even soothing, to white overseers. But among the enslaved, they passed instructions right under watchful eyes. Church basements, especially in the north, often became hiding places. Rooms tucked beneath the sanctuary, where food and bedding were hidden behind choir robes and hymnals. Ministers sometimes served as conductors, using their sermons to alert congregants about upcoming movements or dangers, cloaked in biblical language that doubled as operational briefings. In Philadelphia, Mother Bethel AME Church, the first African Methodist Episcopal church in the US, became a cornerstone of abolitionist activity. In Ohio, churches along the border became known as stations, not just for their sermons, but for their secret back rooms and sympathetic members. Even in the South, where risks were highest, prayer meetings and hush arbors deep in the woods allowed enslaved people to gather, share songs, and pass information. They used rhythm and rhyme to remember complex instructions in a world where reading could cost you your life. The church gave more than shelter. It gave a voice. It gave songs. It gave hope wrapped in harmony. And so, as the sun went down and the fields grew still, voices would rise softly in the dark. It sounded like praise. But it was also a plan. The Underground Railroad was not built by any one group, race, or region. It was held together by a fragile alliance of farmers, ministers, schoolteachers, sailors, and shopkeepers, each risking their safety, their families, and often their lives for a cause greater than themselves: freedom. Some were well known, like William Still, a free black man in Philadelphia who is often called the father of the Underground Railroad. As chairman of the Vigilance Committee, he recorded names, dates, and stories of those who passed through his care. His records became one of the most valuable historical documents we have today. But he didn't keep them for fame. He kept them so families might one day find each other again. Then there was Levi Coffin, a white Quaker merchant in Indiana, whose home became known as the Grand Central Station of the Underground Railroad. With his wife Catherine, he helped thousands of fugitives. Their home had hidden compartments, fake walls, and always an extra pot on the stove. Levi never hid his efforts, though many begged him to stop. He simply said, "I knew my duty, but for every known name, there were dozens more we'll never hear about. Unnamed women who sewed disguises, children who stood watch at the window, sailors who hid fugitives in ship holds, and innkeepers who left keys under stones. Abolitionist newspapers printed subtle messages and updates. Couriers delivered letters in code. Some white Southern allies even helped people escape under the noses of their own families and neighbors. These helpers didn't always agree politically or religiously. Some were deeply devout. Others were simply driven by a sense of right and wrong that could not be silenced. They didn't need to be perfect. They just needed to act. And they did. The Underground Railroad wasn't fueled by institutions or armies. It was powered by ordinary people doing the right thing quietly, over and over again. They didn't ask for credit. They just left a door unlocked, lit a lantern, gave a meal, whispered, "Go now," and vanished into history, leaving only freedom in their wake. For many who rode the invisible rails of the Underground Railroad, freedom didn't come with the first step out of the plantation, nor with the last safe house in Ohio. It came across a border, one that marked more than just geography. It marked safety. It marked survival. It marked Canada. In the early to mid-1800s, even northern US states became unsafe after the passage of the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, which allowed escaped slaves to be captured and returned from almost anywhere in the country. No papers, no questions. Freedom was fragile, unless it lay beyond America's reach. So they pressed on. Canada, under British law, had abolished slavery by 1834. Once fugitives crossed into Ontario, often by way of Detroit, Buffalo, or upstate New York, they were finally beyond the grasp of slave catchers and US law. There, they could breathe. Not easily, not always safely, but legally. That mattered. The journey was brutal. Long stretches were made on foot. Rivers had to be crossed in rowboats under the cover of night. Some fugitives bribed ferrymen, others waited for ice to form before walking across. Each crossing was a gamble. And yet, they came. By some estimates, 30,000 to 40,000 formerly enslaved people made it to Canada. Entire communities formed in places like Windsor, St. Catharines, Buxton, and Toronto. There were schools, churches, businesses. Black Canadians began publishing newspapers, founding anti-slavery societies, and advocating for civil rights, not just for themselves, but for those still in bondage back south. Harriet Tubman herself lived in St. Catharines for several years, using it as a base for her return trips into the US to rescue others. For her and many others, Canada wasn't the end. It was a beginning, but it wasn't a paradise. Racism and economic hardship still existed. Black settlers were often segregated and given the hardest, lowest-paying jobs. But they were not property. They were not hunted. And that difference meant everything. So imagine the moment. Your feet touch foreign soil. Your heart is still racing. You turn and look behind, across the river, across the past, then forward. For the first time in your life, no one owns you. You are free, and the stars are still overhead. The Underground Railroad didn't just change lives, it rattled the foundations of a slaveholding society. And that society fought back. To Southern slave owners, every successful escape was more than lost property. It was a crack in the wall of their power. Their wealth, laws, and way of life all relied on one brutal fact. People were treated as things, and the Underground Railroad shattered that illusion, one step at a time. So they struck back with fear. Posters offering rewards for fugitives became a common sight. $100, $500, even $1,000 for a man, woman, or child, returned dead or alive. Slave catchers, some sanctioned by law, others simply bounty hunters, roamed northern states with dogs, pistols, and forged paperwork. Free black Americans were often kidnapped off the street and sold back into slavery under false claims. To make escape even harder, Congress passed the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, the most draconian version yet. It forced northern officials and citizens to aid in recaptures. Judges were paid more for ruling in favor of slaveholders, and anyone who assisted an escape, even with bread or shelter, could face fines and jail. The law turned even free states into hunting grounds. Cities like Boston and Philadelphia became battlegrounds between slave catchers and anti-slavery activists. In some cases, mobs broke into courthouses to rescue captured fugitives before they could be sent south. The South, meanwhile, painted the Underground Railroad as criminal conspiracy. Pro-slavery newspapers accused northern abolitionists of stealing property and inciting rebellion. Rumors of insurrection spread fear and were sometimes used to justify brutal crackdowns on enslaved communities. And yet, the railroad pressed on, because the very intensity of the backlash only deepened the resolve of its operators. They dug tunnels, added false walls, built tighter networks. Some moved further north, into Canada, to avoid the growing reach of federal enforcement. The resistance didn't stop the railroad. It revealed just how powerful it had become. Every capture sparked outrage, every escape gave hope, and every clash over fugitive slaves pushed the nation closer to a breaking point, one that would erupt soon enough in civil war. But before the armies marched and the battle flags flew, there were whispers and wagons, and the quiet rebellion of ordinary people doing what the law forbade and what conscience demanded. The Civil War came, and with it, the Emancipation Proclamation, the fall of the Confederacy, and the legal end of slavery in the United States. But long before Lincoln signed a single document, long before armies clashed at Antietam or Gettysburg, freedom was already being claimed in secret, by torchlight, by footstep, by those who ran, and those who reached back to help others follow. The Underground Railroad was never a building, a monument, or a government program. It left behind no statues at the time, no official medals or records. Its legacy was carved into the soil, the stars, and the memories of those who walked it. It lived in stories, whispered, shared, sometimes believed, sometimes dismissed. And yet, it persisted. Today, the paths walked by fugitives are honoured in museums, memorials, and preserved homes. Places like the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad Visitor Center in Maryland or the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center in Cincinnati stand as quiet testaments to those who risked everything for liberty. But its true legacy goes beyond any one location. It lies in the idea that ordinary people, facing monstrous injustice, found ways to resist. Without armies, without laws, without power. They resisted with quilts and songs, with lanterns in windows, with unlocked doors and unspoken trust. They forged networks without blueprints. They helped strangers with no promise of reward. And they answered the question, again and again, not what can I do, but what must I do? That is the Underground Railroad's deepest lesson. Not just that freedom is precious, but that it is possible, and that courage does not always roar. Sometimes it simply waits in a field after midnight, holding out a hand. The echoes of the railroad live on in every act of conscience that defies cruelty, in every effort to protect the vulnerable, to speak the truth, to offer safe passage when the world is burning. Because injustice doesn't always wear chains anymore, but it still walks, and so too must we. Somewhere out there the stars are still overhead, and someone somewhere is still whispering, "This way, you're almost free." Inuit mythology does not come to life with lightning bolts or golden thrones. It emerges slowly, like breath on frost. It lives in the snow, in the silence, in the spaces where words are few and meaning is deep. These stories were not written on paper. They were carved into memory, shaped by wind, and carried across generations by voice and firelight. Inuit people have inhabited the Arctic for thousands of years, a world of vast white landscapes, shifting ice, and long, unbroken nights. In this frozen world, survival depends on deep respect for nature. So too does their mythology. Their stories aren't simply entertainment. They are lessons: how to live, how to hunt, how to honor the balance between humans, animals, and spirits. The line between the natural and the supernatural is thin. The wind can whisper, the ocean can breathe, the animals can hear your thoughts. Unlike many mythologies that separate gods from mortals, Inuit tales are more intimate. The spirits live among the people. They watch, they guide, sometimes they punish. They are not distant, they are personal. Elders would tell these tales in low voices inside snow houses, wrapped in fur, with the wind howling just outside. Children listened, not just to learn the stories, but to understand the land. A myth about a raven wasn't just a bird tale. It taught cleverness. A story about a seal spirit wasn't just eerie. It reminded hunters to offer thanks for the animal's life. Time moved differently in the Arctic. So did storytelling. No clocks, no rush. A story could stretch over a night or a season. Each retelling would shift slightly, like drifting snow, shaped by the teller, the audience, the moment. Inuit mythology is not a single book or pantheon. It is a constellation of beliefs, shaped by different Inuit groups across Alaska, Canada, and Greenland. But the themes echo: transformation, survival, the spirits of animals, the power of the sea, and the mysterious presence of Sedna, the sea goddess, the mother of all marine life. These aren't just old tales. They are living echoes in the ice, still carried by wind, still whispered in the dark. Beneath the frozen waves of the Arctic Ocean, in a kingdom of cold silence and drifting bones, lives Sedna. She is not a goddess in the classical sense. She does not sit on a throne. She does not wear a crown. She is tangled in the currents, her hair long and dark, her fingers lost to betrayal. Sedna is the most powerful spirit in Inuit mythology, the mother of all sea creatures. The seals, whales, walruses, and fish are said to have come from her. She governs the ocean's bounty, and if she is angered, the hunt fails. The sea goes quiet, the people go hungry. Her story changes from place to place, as all oral traditions do, but the bones remain the same. Once she was a young woman. Some say the daughter of a creator god, others say a girl of no special birth. Many versions tell of how she refused suitors or was tricked into marrying a bird or a dog disguised as a man. Her father, seeking to rescue her or rid himself of shame, takes her away by boat. But the storm rises. As the sea crashes around them, her father, in fear or desperation, throws Sedna overboard. She clings to the side of the boat, screaming for help. But he cuts off her fingers one by one. As they fall into the sea, each severed piece becomes a creature, a seal, a fish, a whale. Sedna sinks. She does not die. She becomes. Now she dwells beneath the sea in a shadowy realm, her hair always tangled, her spirit always watching. When hunters are greedy or disrespectful, she withholds the animals. She must be appeased. A shaman is sent into trance, journeying beneath the sea, combing her hair, calming her fury, asking for forgiveness. Sedna is pain. Sedna is power. She is the memory of betrayal and the keeper of balance. She is why hunters must give thanks. Why no part of the animal is wasted. Why silence follows the kill. She is the ocean's grief and its mercy. And even now under the ice, Sedna waits, listening. In the Inuit world, animals are not just animals. They are watchers, teachers, spirits wrapped in fur and feather, fin and fang. To survive in the Arctic is to live among beings that are powerful, intelligent, and deeply aware. You do not conquer them. You speak to them. And sometimes, they speak back. Inuit mythology is filled with stories of animals that walk between worlds. Not just physically, but spiritually. Some transform, appearing as humans in animal form, or animals who shed their skin to walk among people as men or women. These are shapeshifters, and they carry both wisdom and danger. The raven is one of the most enduring figures, a trickster, clever and unpredictable. In some stories, he steals the sun to bring light to the world. In others, he plays games with humans or rearranges the landscape just for amusement. Raven is not evil, but he is never entirely safe. He is a reminder that nature does not always follow your expectations. The polar bear, Nanook, is not just a mighty hunter. He is sometimes a guardian spirit, sometimes a man in a bear's body. To kill one is to enter a sacred contract. The bear must be honoured, its bones returned to the earth, its soul thanked, or else the spirits may turn cold and silent. Then there are the spirits that guard the animals themselves. Every creature, seal, fox, caribou, has an inua, a kind of soul. If the animal is mistreated or taken without respect, its inua can return in anger. Some Inuit stories tell of animals who come back, disguised as people, to punish or test those who forget gratitude. And always, beneath the surface, there is the quiet truth. Humans are not the masters of nature. They are guests, temporary ones. And the animals, seen or unseen, are older than memory. So children are taught early. Do not laugh at the raven. Do not waste what you hunt. Do not step on a sleeping seal's shadow. The spirits are always watching, not from the sky, but from the snow, from the trees, from behind eyes that do not blink. In the vast Arctic, where the land seems endless and the sky feels close enough to touch, there are those who can move between the seen and the unseen. They are not priests, not prophets. They are something older, wilder. They are the Angakuk, shamans of the Inuit. The Angakuk is not chosen lightly. Some are born with signs, unusual dreams, visions, or survival from impossible accidents. Others are trained. But all must walk the edge between life and death, sanity and silence, earth and spirit. Their role is both healer and messenger. When someone is sick and no herb or bone can cure them, the Angakuk is called. When the seals vanish from the ice or storms rise without end, it is the Angakuk who travels, not by foot, but by soul. Through drum and trance, chanting and breath, they enter other realms. Worlds hidden beneath the ocean, inside the sky, behind the land itself. It is not a vision, it is a journey. In these spirit realms, the Angakuk meets beings that no ordinary person should face. The ghosts of the angry dead, the spirits of animals denied thanks, and the great forces like Sedna, the sea goddess. Only the Angakuk can descend into her underwater realm, comb her tangled hair, soothe her fury, and return balance to the human world. But the price is heavy. The Angakuk often lives apart, respected but not always trusted. Their dreams are strange. Their eyes see too much, and they carry burdens others cannot. They know which child will fall sick before the symptoms appear. They hear voices when the wind is still. They are not gods. They make mistakes. And some, it is said, become corrupted, using their powers for personal gain or failing to return from the spirit journey. These fallen shamans are feared. Their names are rarely spoken. Still, in times of trouble, it is the Angakuk who is called. They sit by the fire, close their eyes, and slip away, across ice, into darkness, toward the heart of the unseen. Not everyone believes in spirits, but when the food vanishes, when the child won't wake, when the sea turns black, everyone listens. In the Arctic night, when the snow is still and the dogs refuse to bark, the elders say to keep your voice low, not because of wolves, not because of wind, but because the dead are listening. Inuit mythology does not draw a firm line between life and death. The dead are not gone. They linger, sometimes as memory, sometimes as presence, and sometimes as something colder. Restless spirits, known in some traditions as Tuangait or Angiak, are not rare. They can be angry, hungry, lost, and when the living break old taboos, they return. What kind of taboos? There are many. Ancient rules passed down, not always explained, but always followed. Never whistle at the northern lights. Never cook certain animals in the same pot. Never speak the name of the recently dead too soon. These acts might invite spirits back before they are ready, or before they've gone. The dead must be respected. Burials were done with care. Personal items were left with the body, tools, knives, amulets, not for sentiment, but so the spirit would not feel cheated or empty-handed in the next life. Graves were often built with stones piled high, both to protect the body and to remind the living. Something sacred lies beneath. But even then, spirits sometimes wander. Some return out of love, a mother to watch over her child, a hunter to guide his family. But others come back out of pain, betrayal, or simply because they cannot rest. Their shadows might flicker across the tent wall. Their voices might echo in the creak of ice. An unexplained illness, a string of bad luck, a persistent cold that no fire can cure, all might be signs that a spirit is near. When this happens, the Angakuk is consulted. Through chants and offerings, they may speak to the dead, offer closure, or even guide the spirit to rest. But sometimes, only silence can protect you. And so, the people remain careful. They do not joke about death. They do not speak carelessly at night. Because in the Arctic, the past does not sleep. It walks, and it remembers. On some Arctic nights, when the sky is clear and the world is still, the heavens begin to move. Curtains of light ripple across the darkness. Green, violet, sometimes red. They flicker like fire. They swirl like wind. These are the aurora borealis, and in Inuit mythology, they are not just beautiful, they are alive. To the Inuit, the northern lights are not a meteorological phenomenon, they are spirits. Some say they are the souls of the dead, playing across the sky, dancing, celebrating, perhaps watching. Others say they are the torches of ancient hunters, lighting the way through the night sky in search of game. but they are never meaningless. In some Inuit regions, it is believed that the lights are the spirits of children lost too soon, laughing and playing with a walrus skull as a kind of celestial game. In others, the lights are the ancestors themselves, gathered in the sky to remind the living of their presence, not in words, but in motion. The lights are also said to be warnings. When they flash and swirl quickly, it may signal that spirits are restless or displeased, that something in the human world has gone unbalanced. A broken taboo, a forgotten offering, a neglected ritual. The sky remembers what we forget. Because of this, the aurora must be treated with deep respect. Children are told not to whistle at the lights. It might call the spirits too close. Some say whistling can make the lights descend and slice off your head. Others say it opens a door for the dead to enter the world of the living. The Inuit did not fear the lights, but they did not take them lightly. They were watched with reverence. They were signs, messages, warnings, or sometimes simply gifts. And even now, when the lights appear over a quiet village, the old stories stir. People step outside and watch. They fall silent, feeling something ancient move above them. No voice explains it. No science replaces it. Because sometimes, what dances in the sky is not a question to solve. It's a reminder that we are never alone under the stars. In the beginning, there was ice and silence. The land was flat, endless, and covered in snow, untouched by human foot or animal track. But even in that emptiness, life was waiting. Inuit creation stories don't begin with fire from the heavens or gods sculpting mountains. They begin with nature itself, vast and mysterious. The world was not made at once. It formed slowly, spirit by spirit, breath by breath, shape by shape. One story tells of Raven, or Tulugak, a powerful and clever spirit who once lived in the dark, for there was no sun, no moon, no stars. The world was shrouded in permanent shadow. Raven grew tired of stumbling in blackness, and so, with trickery or wisdom or both, he stole light from a selfish being who had locked it away. He flung it into the sky, breaking it into pieces. The sun, the stars, the moon. Raven's gift gave the Arctic its long summer days and its haunting winter nights. Other stories speak of giants who once walked the land, beings of immense power and loneliness. These giants shaped mountains with their hands, carved rivers with their footprints, and filled the oceans with their tears. Eventually they faded, but their bones became the land. Their breath became the wind. There are also tales of two brothers, spirits who argued over how to make the world. One brother created caribou, sleek, fast, and wild, but the other said they would be too hard to hunt. So he made them weaker, and a balance was formed. These stories remind listeners that the world is not perfect. It is negotiated. Everything has its cost. Creation, in Inuit belief, is not a one-time event. It is ongoing. Every hunt, every storm, every birth and death, these continue the shaping. The land listens, the sea shifts, the world is not finished, and humans, we are not masters, we are guests. To live in the Arctic is to live in a world still forming, still speaking. You cannot own this place, but if you are quiet, you might understand it. Just a little. Inuit myths are more than entertainment. They are survival guides. Woven through every tale is a warning, a lesson, a truth. Not the kind printed in books or delivered by rulers, but truths shaped by ice, hunger, and silence. Stories that teach not just how to live, but how to stay alive. These are morality tales with teeth. Take, for example, the story of the Inuit, a creature that lives beneath the ice, in frigid Arctic waters. It waits silently beneath cracks and breathing holes, listening. It wears a parka. Its fingers are long. Its eyes, too large. And if a child strays too close to the shore, the Inuit reaches up, pulls them under, and keeps them forever. This isn't just a ghost story. It's a lesson. Don't wander alone. Don't go near thin ice. The Kalapilluit watches where your parents cannot. Or consider the tale of the Mahaha, a thin, icy demon who stalks in the cold, grinning and giggling. It doesn't kill with claws or clubs. It tickles. With long fingers, it tickles its victims until they freeze or stop breathing. Absurd? Maybe. But it teaches caution. Never take the silence of the Arctic for safety. Some dangers come smiling. Then there are stories about dishonoring animals. Hunters who waste meat, mock their prey, or forget rituals. In these tales, the animals return as spirits, sometimes in dreams, sometimes in storms. They take revenge or simply vanish, leaving the people to starve. The lesson is simple: survive with respect. Gratitude is not optional. Even Sedna's tale, brutal and haunting, is a lesson about consequences, about betrayal, imbalance, and the deep cost of greed and fear. Her pain becomes the ocean's hunger. Her anger becomes the reason for failed hunts. You do not anger Sedna. You do not forget to give back. Inuit morality isn't about commandments or written laws. It is lived knowledge, shaped by hardship, and passed down through whisper and song. The stories feel strange to outsiders. Dark, cold, often cruel. But they are precise, effective, remembered, and they still echo, in a child's fear of thin ice, in a hunter's quiet prayer before the kill, in the silence that follows every story, where the lesson lingers, waiting to be understood. The world has changed. The snowmobiles have replaced dog sleds. Satellites cross the sky where once only stars danced. Even the northern lights are explained in textbooks now. Solar particles, geomagnetic storms, atmospheric ions. And yet, the old stories remain. Inuit mythology, though once only passed from mouth to ear beside whale oil lamps, has survived colonization, missionary pressure, and modern distractions. It has lived through forced relocations, language suppression, and the long, painful shadow of residential schools. And still, the myths whisper beneath the surface. Today, Inuit artists carve Sedna into soapstone. Children in Nunavut still hear about the Kalapilluit from their grandparents. Inuit rappers reference ancient spirits in modern lyrics. Storytellers perform in community centres, bringing ancient figures like Raven, Mahaha, and the shape-shifting polar bear to new generations. These aren't relics, they are tools, cultural memory, identity stitched together from shadow and survival. In a world where climate change threatens traditional hunting routes, and where screens glow brighter than firelight, these myths ground the Inuit people. They remind them, and anyone listening, that human beings are not separate from nature, that the land has rules, that spirits still walk quietly alongside us. Modern Inuit leaders, scholars, and elders have taken up the task of preserving not just the myths, but the language and rhythm of storytelling itself. Because the stories lose power when translated into the cold shapes of colonial tongues. The syllables of Inuktitut carry meanings that English cannot. Yet even in translation, the stories pulse. They speak of resilience, of grief, of the hard beauty of survival. And though the world may try to categorize them as folklore, superstition, or bedtime stories, the Inuit know better. These are not just stories. They are maps of who they are, of where they've been, of what they carry. So if you ever find yourself in the Arctic, far from the lights and noise of the South, pause for a moment. Let the wind pass. Listen to the ice groan, the snow shift, the sky move. You might hear a story in that silence, old, unfinished, still breathing, just like the people who told it.